Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from the Chartered Institute of Export and International Trade about some of the cutting-edge digital solutions that could enhance cross-border trade. And this is at a time of growing uncertainty in global commerce, particularly with the Trump administration set to introduce a wide range of tariffs today, potentially instigating a global trade war, no less. So could digitalization be a means towards reducing some of the pressures currently faced by businesses? Maybe that's a question we'll be considering today. But my name is William Barnes-Graham, the Executive Editor at the Chartered Institute. It's great to see so many of you joining today's session. For those of you who are new, welcome along. Anyone returning, welcome back. But on the next slide, please. Thank you very much. Let's firstly introduce our speakers for today. I'm delighted to be joined again by Ilona Kavka, the lead of the Chartered Institute's recently launched Imports Advisory practice, who has vast experience and expertise on cross-border trade, including the digitalization of customs processes and supply chains. Ilona will be presenting on some of the pilots with development of new digital trade corridors later on. Before that, we are delighted to also welcome Sean Copeland, the co-founder of Boex, for today's webinar. Sean founded Boex out of what he calls a deep fascination with the history of the Bill of Exchange, and he has operated for decades at the intersection of this history with contemporary technology and commerce. As well as being founder of Boex, Sean serves as a council member of the CCNSO within the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, and he also contributes to the development of global internet policy and governance. We're delighted to be partnering with Boex for this webinar, and Sean will, in a few moments' time, introduce today's topic, the history of trade digitalization, why this matters in a social context, and some of the solutions that Boex is currently developing. On the next slide, before we get into the presentations, we're going to run a quick poll to find out a little bit more about you, our audience. So we are here asking, how high do you consider the level of digitalization of your supply chain? The options are on screen. They range from very high to low, or you may not know or have that visibility at this point. While you're answering that poll, the usual housekeeping notes from me. Firstly, you can contact me with any comments or questions using the question panel on the GoToWebinar window. We definitely encourage you to write in any questions, musings, or thoughts you may have. Though please note, we cannot guarantee we will get to every comment in the allocated time. We've built this webinar as being 45 minutes, but can run to the full hour if needed. Secondly, a recording of today's webinar, along with a copy of the slides, will be posted onto the Insights section of our website by the end of the week. So you'll just need to go to export.org.uk, then click the Resources tab in the navigation bar, and then Insights from the drop-down, and you should be able to find the recording there. Do get in touch if for any reason you have any issues with any of that. But I'll give you just a few more seconds to answer that poll. Let's do a short countdown, 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look at the results. So only about 12% of you have a very high level of digitalization at the moment. Most of you, or the biggest proportion, is 35% on intermediate, 29% low, 24% don't know or have visibility at this stage. So quite a mix of responses there, very revealing. Thank you everyone for answering that poll. Enough of me though to introduce the topic of digitalization in trade. On the next slide, I'm delighted to hand over to Sean Copeland, the founder of Boex. Over to you, Sean.
Thank you so much, William. So Boex is about bills of exchange, and this is a document that has existed for around 6,000 years in one form or another. And we came about finding it because back in the early 1990s, we were part of payment processing on the internet, and we had a problem. We could not figure out how to trust the transactions that were going on. And what ended up happening is we started this journey, and we started to look at different means and different mechanisms on how to deal with how to get trust on the internet. And we stumbled upon bills of exchange. And we started to experiment and try different things and see what we could get to work, what would be valid, what would actually make a document stand up in court. And by about 2014, we had defined a model that allowed us to actually do a bills of exchange online on top of Envoy, which was a payment provider that's now part of WorldPay. And we thought, oh, this is fantastic. People are going to be able to use this. We'll get adoption because there's nothing like it out in the world. Well, that didn't quite happen. But nevertheless, we persevered. And getting into 2019, we were starting to talk with lawyers and academics, trying to understand what we were, quote unquote, doing wrong. And the feedback that we kept getting was, you're not doing anything wrong. You actually got this right. And we were like, we can't explain this. We can't express this to people. They couldn't understand it. And well, the self-validation and the validation from the likes of the cyber justice labs was wonderful for us. Nothing was working. And then in 2023, the UK passes the Electronic Trade Document Act. And suddenly for us, everything changes. And suddenly people were coming to us and saying, weren't you working on? And of course, not only were we have been working on, we had continued to work on an electronic form of the bills of exchange. And coming out of the pandemic, we were very aware that one segment of the economic world, the small business community, was being hit hardest by the effects of the pandemic. And we were looking at what was going on, and we realized that there was no real tool for small business in doing their trade. And we realized that actually what we were doing was actually well suited for a small business. We had been going around and we've been talking to small businesses to understand their pain points and this very wide term of visibility. And it turned out that visibility would include things like fat fingers, document duplication, not knowing where items were. And we realized that with the bills of exchange, we could wrap ourselves around various trade documents and processes, and we could enable or give a tool to SMEs. What was interesting about that is that about this time, the UK government and SAGE and other public companies were saying that there's about 290 billion British pounds available for SMEs in untapped opportunity on a yearly basis, which is quite significant. And while that was all happening, we ended up attending a trade seminar here in the UK. And there was an SME person up on stage, and it was really daunting. She came up and she was talking about all of her problems. And these were all problems that we had looked at, we had understood. And she basically said to the owners, if you will, or main people in very large companies, help me. I want to do trade. I want my job to be easier. I want to accomplish what I want, but I have nothing here. Help me. Now I thought there would be a whole lot of people that would go down and want to talk to her. Not a single person did. We did, of course, and we ended up going down a route with her and understanding her business. And she actually became our pilot client, if you will. And we recently did an online trade with her with a full system that we have been developing in one sense over 20 years, but much more rapidly over the last year with a very good development company called Endava that has a very firm logistics and payments programming cadre. And that combination has led us to where we are today. So what we are trying to do and what we are doing is we are bringing the ability for trust to the SME for when they're dealing with potential clients, customers overseas, and also in terms of inland bills. Next slide. So for us, as I said, the ETDA Act was a huge game changer for us. And it wasn't just about modernization. It was actually an introduction to a gateway for more inclusive trade. And we could see that there were more economic benefits to what we were doing. And it would allow for fairness in trade, empowerment, and also growth. So with this, we realized that bills of exchange, which if you went to a bank as a paper document might cost you 2,000 euro, were very economical when done with how we are doing it as a process. When we're helping you do your workflow automation and other components, we're able to reduce your overall cost just on the efficiencies that we had introduced. Next slide. So here's a short video.
We know managing supply chains is tougher than ever. Confusing tax rules, red tape, and rising costs. For UK-based small and medium-sized businesses, Boex is here to help. Get rid of old archaic processes and get back to what really matters: running your business. Boex is a one-stop, user-friendly platform that digitizes trade. We make document management easy, offer trade visibility, legal certainty, identity verification, payment solutions, credit insurance, and real user support. Whether you're importing or exporting, make international trade easier, cheaper, and faster with Boex. We're ready when you are. Sign up at boex.biz today.
So that's a kind of commercial of what we are doing. So we are doing something different, obviously. One of the things that we learned over time was that having a purpose for the business was a valuable thing. And for us, this is actually to support women in the third world developing and indigenous communities at scale, taking some of the revenue that we make in facilitating trade to the education of women in those communities. And it might seem a little strange, but for the amount of money that is in the supply chain, and there's a lot, and there's about 40% slack, to take some of those resources and reallocate it instead of going to shareholders, is our intention is, of course, to redirect and improve situation for these people. And the funny thing about it is we will be able to impact the various ESG goals directly and indirectly the fastest, cheapest way that you can do it, sending a woman to school. And the only way that you can do it without massive government spending, which is not a popular thing, is to find a source that is not going to make a significant difference. And in fact, if you're saving money and able to do this, you have a win. And there is where we are going for our win in terms of using the bills of exchange electronically, taking advantage of the Electronic Trade Document Act, launching this product here in the United Kingdom, where 80% of global trade actually is centered, which is funny given what's coming out of the United States today. The benefit is there. Next slide. So what exactly is a bill of exchange? So a bill of exchange is actually a payment order. And as I said earlier, it goes back about 6,000 years in one form or another. So I won't go into a full history, we'd be here for a long time, but what it was about was enabling two parties who did not know each other to have a way to trust each other when a good had to be bought, say in China, and it had to go by caravan and come back, and the journeys would take years. So they had to have methodologies for dealing with this. And what ended up happening is bills of exchange came about and were fine-tuned. And the issues and obstacles of trade 6,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago are pretty much the same as they are today. Only today we have this thing called the internet and things happen a whole lot faster. But the issues have been the same all along. Anyway, so the bill of exchange, you have basically a buyer, seller, we say a drawer and a drawee and a payee. So those features of the bill of exchange are a little bit different. And when these parties enter into the agreement, you end up with a negotiable, transferable, and enforceable document, which is designed to enable the trust across the border. This is very valuable when you're dealing with trade because it allows for dealing with people that you would not normally deal with, people that you had not met in the past, and you would have faith that your transaction would happen. So what ends up happening is in 1882, the British government, you guys, take all this information, all this knowledge, and you create the Bills of Exchange Act of 1882, which really is this beautiful document that really is a framework that in an electronic world is brilliant. In a paper world, also really good, but some problems that you don't get with electronic trade that you definitely get with paper with pre-buy. Next slide, please. So the problems that crept up was by the 1950s, Xerox had come along. The ability to take a paper document and copy it, duplicate it, now really existed, and fraud started to creep into the system. And at the same time, you had banks coming out with letters of credit. SWIFT was launched in the mid-1970s. And these would be tools that people look at, oh, I've got fraud going on here. We don't have a way to manage what's going on with the paper. If I go over here, I can skip these steps. Sounds great, but what ends up happening is the trust that was existing between businesses starts to go away. When that happens, then you end up with small businesses, especially, having difficulty in expanding their markets. They can't do it because you're not going to send, say, $100,000 worth of goods to Dubai without having trust, or you're going to do it and you're going to be highly stressed about it. So what ends up happening is bills of exchange fall out of favor. Larger businesses are able to dominate, and the SME kind of falls by the wayside. So now from there, you start to see some unusual situations that emerge. You start to see trade slowing down in the stickiness at ports, at borders, so on and so forth, just because the documentation is not properly there, or it's running behind, or it has to come along by courier after the fact. Now, in all of that, the issue isn't the law. The issue is actually there's not a technical infrastructure that exists yet that is going to enable this to work. And as we know, the internet comes along and we start to see all these different processes. When these processes come together, and this was the aha moment for us, we realized that you could, in fact, bring all of this stuff together in a very finite way. Next slide. So, why does the 1880 Act still work today? It works because the people that authored it actually defined what we would call a framework today in a technical speak, that as long as you program and design what you're doing to that act, you have this ability to create a document that is statutory, that is able to function in common law, Sino law, Sharia law, and Napoleonic code all at once, and have it enforced. And the result of that is a document that's transferable, acceptable, and effective. And in fact, when the blockchain comes along, and if you link the two together, you actually end up with a true smart contract. The contract exists because that's what a bill of exchange is, in a sense. And it's smart because there are trigger points and processes that go along with it. Then when you add such things as AI, you end up taking workflow processes and you're able to speed them up, and everyone is in a much better position as a result. And all of this basically gets unlocked and understandable to people when the UK passes the ETDA Act. Next slide. So the ETDA Act, what was interesting about it is when they authored it, they looked at what was on the books and did not make changes. And in doing that, they validated the process that we had actually believed in and that people had told us was correct. And the benefit for us is as other countries adopt similar rules, at the end of the day, everybody's going back to the UK as the place for excellence in trade, excellence in trade law. And in this time, right now, Liberty Day, I suppose, in the United States, there's nothing that is more important, especially for UK and other Commonwealth countries, than the ability to have a mechanism for us to do trade effectively, efficiently, honestly, and to the benefit of everyone that's involved. So right now, we are actually at a threshold, I believe, for SMEs to be able to take their rightful place as the strong backbone to the economy. Next slide. And one more video. This is going to give you guys a show of what we are actually doing.
Boex is transforming international trade by making it simpler, faster, and more cost-effective for businesses. No more old-school paperwork, no more delays, just seamless digital trade transactions. Boex digitizes bills of exchange, allowing you to create, manage, and track trade documents with ease. Simply enter the key details, and Boex generates a legally compliant, secure digital document, fully recognized under UK and international trade laws. Need approvals? No problem. Boex streamlines the process with real-time tracking, secure digital signatures, and automated workflows, reducing errors and eliminating unnecessary admin. Plus, it integrates with financial institutions, ensuring faster payments and clear process visibility for all parties involved. Built on Web 3.0 and AI-powered automation, Boex ensures transparency, security, and legal certainty in every transaction. Whether you're handling shipping, customs, or supply chain finance, Boex removes the friction, saving you time and money. Join Boex today and experience the future of trade, faster, safer, smarter.
What you're actually seeing is we created a process, we call it ping pong internally, that allows for parties to negotiate directly and keep that process in their place. So where all this goes for us and where my real passion comes into this is, of course, the CIC social mission that we have. And this, of course, as I said earlier, is taking the revenue that is earned after we pay back what's costing to build this and sending that to providing education for women in the third developing and indigenous communities. And part of this to make this work is high integration with banks, trade platforms, insurers, fintechs, and other people within the supply chain. Our knowledge is on the bills of exchange. We know it very well, and we want to be a ubiquitous platform that allows all other various components within the supply chain to link off and work with us. We want to be part of the solution with everyone. Next slide. So again, the CIC structure is not just about FinTech, it's about impacting the world and doing something really, really good. And that's what we're trying to do. And we believe that trade in improving the business here, in improving people's lot and life elsewhere is a good move and a benefit to us all. Next slide. So there you go. Thank you for listening to me. And I'm sorry that I probably went off on a bit of a tangent.
No, that's great. Thank you, Sean. It was great history, partly there about a bit of exchange and kind of a history of trade digitalization, but also this regulatory opportunity that there now is. And I think some of the social aspects of it you're talking about as well, really important. It's important that all of this movement isn't just a commercial venture, but it does kind of have a positive impact on the world. On the next slide, we're going to just run a quick poll now, just to see if you'd like to receive any further information from Boex about their supply chain solutions after this webinar. But while you're answering that poll, we had a question come in from Lucinda. Lucinda's referring to the report from the International Chamber of Commerce, which I think got published this week, which estimated that digitalization could boost UK trade by 25 billion and contribute efficiency savings worth 225 billion. Sean, do you agree with the kind of a scale of the opportunity outlined by the ICC? And given the pessimism we've alluded to in trade at the moment, why isn't more being said about this opportunity?
Two-part question. The easiest part is actually I do believe those numbers are correct. Governments in the Western world have spent hundreds of millions of dollars over the last number of decades trying to get SMEs to participate in trade. And they do that because it increases the GDP of country, it increases jobs, so on and so forth, productivity, if you will. And while they're doing it, they're doing it because they know that for every SME that is actually trading internationally, there's another one or two that also want to do it, but they're just not. So the question really becomes, why not? And when you look at it, it really goes down to, it's a difficult process. There's a lot of paperwork. You don't have systems that are efficient for an SME. They got to go across, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different systems. So it takes all day. So it's a big commitment for an SME. So if you can streamline that, if you can increase their workflow automation, reduce the time, reduce errors, reduce other issues, perhaps government comes along then and also reduces some of the red tape, you end up with the ability to reach those numbers. And they're significant. I know before the last election, it was talked about that if you just had a bunch of reliable systems in the UK, they could get rid of the VAT. That's coming from the UK government, not from me. But that's hugely significant. The second question, can you repeat the second question? Sorry.
The second part was kind of, given the pessimism in trade at the moment, why isn't more being said about the opportunity?
I don't think it's a question of more being said about the opportunity as so much as there's a learning and education curve that has to go on. So when you're dealing with international trade, you're really dealing with B2B2B business. And you have to have a dual sales strategy going on at the same time, because everyone that is involved in a trade transaction has to be fully on board for new product, new innovation to happen. And that takes time.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess it's any transformation, as you say, does take time. And this is a significant transformation we're going through. But Sean, it's been great hearing from you so far. We'll hear from you a bit more later on when it comes to the panel discussion. But on the next slide, it is my delight to welcome on Ilona Kavka, who is going to be talking about another example of how a new digital solution could better facilitate cross-border trade in the future. Ilona is the lead of the Chartered Institute's Imports Advisory Practice. Over to you.
Thank you, Will, and thank you, Sean. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I would like to bring up today a little bit more about the concept of digital trade corridors, which kind of nicely links with what Sean was talking about today. Next slide, please. Let's start with a simple question. why does digital trade matter? And there are actually many reasons, but I will give you just a few to highlight the importance of digital trade and its awareness. For British businesses, for example, digital trade nowadays is not just a buzzword from tech. It's a real enabler of growth. Why? Because it opens up access to wider consumer markets. You can reach more customers around the world by just selling online, whether you're a large exporter or a small creative business selling internationally from your kitchen table. It allows you to digitalize your processes, so process more and gives you more opportunities. It also helps you to trade more efficiently and cost effectively. By digitalizing your shipping, logistics, and documentation, you can reduce delays, cut admin costs, speed up delivery, and this is very vital in a competitive global marketplace. We all want our delivery delivered at our doorstep tomorrow, by morning, ideally. And finally, it allows businesses to grow their operations globally. So you can hire talent in different regions to manage remote teams and all of that through digital platforms. But while digital trade offers those opportunities, it also needs right infrastructure behind it. And this is where the idea of digital trade corridors comes in, creating secure digital highways for trade with trusted data that can move across the border smoothly and for the benefit of everybody in a supply chain. Next slide, please. So if the digital trade is helping businesses reach new markets to trade efficiently and grow globally, the next question is, how do we make this kind of seamless cross-border trade actually work in practice? And this is where the digital trade corridor concepts comes in. And traditionally, a trade corridor, and you can see the official term in the slide, but it refers to a network of transport routes that facilitate these movements of goods between countries that are kind of connected by trade agreements, laws, and very often cultural ties. But digital trade corridors apply the same idea of movement, but with data and digital processes. So you're creating a connected, secure network that allows trade-related information flow efficiently as the goods themselves. So those trade corridors enable customs and border authorities to exchange trusted data in real time. They help speed up the clearance, reduce duplication, and improve any risk management that's needed. It also shifts away from the paper-based systems towards integrated digital platforms. I'm not saying that the paper-based systems or paper-based movements stop existing and we seize them, but we make them available in digital format. So those digital trade corridors are a key enabler of everything we basically just talked about before, and they bring the invisible benefits, invisible, that become visible quite quickly once we implement them. And we connect the systems, businesses, and governments around the world. And I will show you that in practice just in a few slides. Next slide, please. So only recently I have read an article saying that in our daily life, we are not aware how much effort goes into delivering all the daily use products we have in our lives to places where we can get them from as a consumer. And I think I haven't read anything more true and accurate than this statement in a while. When we think of supply chains, it's very easy to imagine a simple journey. A product made it in one place and delivered to another. So in reality, supply chains are very, very complex systems and networks of moving parts, people, and processes that are going and stretching across the borders and industries. We have the producers, manufacturers, growers that create raw materials or finished goods. We have distributors, organizations that make the logistics of getting goods from the factory to a warehouse, from one country to another. And these depend heavily on the transport routes, so road, sea, air, rail, and all of them have to be coordinated by freight forwarders, customs brokers, carriers, all to make it happen smoothly. We have fulfillment stage, or where the orders are processed, picked, packed. We have distributors in the fulfillment, We have borders crossing, which are very important, especially in my daily life. And we have those related to regulatory compliance, duties, paperwork. We have risks related to cross-border movements, changing documentation, the issues with the documentation, changing regulations, customs delays, everything can hold up shipment for sometimes even to good few days. And finally, we have the consumer that wants to press buy now or pick up the product from a shelf, but they don't really see how does it get there. So all of those processes are quite complex, and we need global interconnected supply chains to deliver those products on time, and that we have the constant supply. Next slide, please. So I have taken you through those complexities and challenges between supply chain actors, but how do we actually build trust across those fragmented systems? On this slide, you can see an example of a framework where a trusted supply chain visibility comes in. What you can see here are the core components that enable a more connected, transparent, and secure supply chain. We have authentication, trusted supply chain information, that's then next monitored secure transport supported by Internet of Things devices, for example, sealed containers. We also have in-market compliance audits that are there to make sure that the goods meet requirements when they enter the domestic markets. And we have government dashboards that enable the government agencies to do advanced risk assessments or even support trusted traders facilitations through this technology or processes that they put in place. So visibility is not just about what's happening, it's about creating this data-rich environment where the trust is built in design, and that helps to reduce frictions between actors and create a supply chain that works smarter, not harder. Next slide, please. Back in 2022 and 2023, the UK ran a series of pilot projects to test how digital trade corridors might work in practice. This is where the Chartered Institute of Export International Trade has gathered all the stakeholders, and within the UK Cabinet Office-led ecosystem of trust, we have been trailing movements of flowers, coffee, tea from Kenya, fish products from Germany, and ambient products from Belgium. We cooperated with Trademark Africa and IOTA Foundation to deliver this project for the UK and the Kenyan trading community. It has been further expanded now, and it's called Border Trade Demonstrator Trails, which we'll look a little bit more at the next slide. So I'm showing you now two examples of digital trade corridors that we have implemented in the UK, and we've been testing them with different stakeholders. Next slide, please. So under this slide, you can see the border trade demonstrator trial that we created extremely efficient digital trade corridor where producers, freight forwarders, and border agencies and port officials collaborate and exchange data to facilitate the movement of chilled poultry from the EU to the UK, specifically from Poland. And as you can see on the slide, the producers, suppliers can create their original documentation that's needed for the movement, which they later upload into the freight forwarder system, where additional documents and data related to the transfer are being provided by different actors. And in this system, in this case, it's docket system, since the data and signals, which can be considered pre-notifications to an interoperable data pipeline. In this case, in our trials, it's a twin product, which further cascades all those information to correct authorities, either port, inventory, cabinet office, border agencies, port officials, or all of them if it's necessary. So data is it's live, you can trust it, and it's digital. So we also convert the documents into digital messages where possible. So the data is updated lifetime, and this creates a clear benefit for the trader, and it creates a visibility for the supply chain. And as well, it gives insight for the governmental agencies to see more data that we allow them to see, or the stakeholders allow them to see. so that they can do all their checks and pre-reviews before goods reach the border, and they can prioritize the goods before they get to the border. As you can see, the future seems quite exciting, and we are looking forward to more of those frameworks and solutions in the future. Thank you, and back to you, Will.
Thank you, Ilona. It sounds like a really great initiative for sure. We're going to ask our next poll now, in which you can let us know if you'd like to participate in trials of digitalisation initiatives, such as digital trade corridors and others, I'm sure. But while you're answering that poll, Ilona, we've had a question come in from Rajesh, who agrees that the border trade demonstrators look really interesting. He's asking, what happens next?
So at this point, we are continuing to develop the framework itself, because what you can see is a framework where we have gathered all the stakeholders and we have connected them to make this very successful movements of goods, and they are happening daily right now. We're looking forward to see whether we'll get further UK government involvement in the projects, but we would like to continue working on making sure that this goes somewhere, and that we can provide the framework and possibilities for traders and for software providers such as Boex to take a part and become a part of this digitalized supply chain and digital trade corridors. Because digital trade corridors is something that's right now being implemented globally in different countries, and they work successfully. More countries choose to create digitalization and digital trade corridors, just facilitate the movement of goods. Like I said, it's something that should be a future solution for everyone.
Terrific. Thank you, Ilona. Just on the next slide, but before we get into the panel discussion, we've had some great questions come through. I did just want to flag that if you would like more advice or support from Ilona on how to digitalize your supply chains, you can do so by accessing the Imports Advisory practice, which Ilona leads. You can do so via the QR code on screen at the moment. Free for practice, experts like Ilona could deliver a range of support, including a 2-hour phone call addressing your business's current challenges or opportunities, support on procedures like inward and outward processing, as well as simplified customs declaration procedures, and also support with sanitary and phytosanitary controls, such as those introduced under the UK's border target operating model. I've also posted a link in the chat in case you'd like any further support on anything I've just mentioned just then. But that's enough for me. On the next slide, we're glad to invite back Sean as well for a discussion with Ilona, going a bit deeper into some of the topics we've mentioned already. I should note at this stage that today's webinar was billed as being 45 minutes, but we can run up to the hour, or for as long as we're getting questions in from you before 3 p.m. If you do need to dash off earlier, you can watch the remainder of the webinar via the recording, which will be on export.org.uk in the next couple of days or so. But the question I want to ask actually, just to get this going. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of excitement, and we touched on it throughout today's webinar. When the Electronic Trade Documents Act passed into law in 2023, there's quite a lot of fanfare, but the sense I've kind of gotten at a few of these webinars and in the industry conferences I've been to recently is that the real benefits of this act haven't quite come to pass yet. So I'll ask this to Sean first and then bring in Ilona. Is there anything you think is getting in the way of this legislation having the transformative effect it was billed as going to be having?
I don't think, thank you for the question, William. I don't think it is something getting in the way. I really believe it is just the education process, which I don't see as a blocker from on high, if you will. People have to get used to a new process. They have to understand it. And you can have many people that are really excited here at the start of the supply chain, but along the way, people don't necessarily understand, why do I need to change? It's working for me. Because they're not necessarily seeing the benefits the same way. So we can't really say things are being difficult or being blocked. I think things are happening quietly behind the scenes, and the magnitude of the change is going to appear kind of all at once when people realize across a single supply chain and start to duplicate it in different supply chain or corridors even, when the dollar value, the time and the value all comes together and people see it and actually realize they are saving time and money. And when that moment happens, it'll be like a singularity in terms of the supply chain. And people will move at that point en masse to the digital processes, in my opinion.
Ilona, anything to add to that?
So I fully agree with what Sean just mentioned. What I can add from my experience of talking to different traders is that they don't really know where to start. They would have to do a lot of work that involves different departments within their business. So very often that's the roadblocker, the lack of kind of project approach to that. That's where I believe we could help. For example, we're actually looking at your processes, what is already digitalized, what what's possible to digitalize, because sometimes you have processes that stop you from doing so, and then we can help. We can help to actually consider different solutions and what is the most important for you and what brings you the ultimate saving at the beginning, because this is what digitalization of your processes is. It's a saving because you have to make an expense at the beginning because you have to invest in some infrastructure, but the return of investment is extremely quick. So yeah, people just have to start. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you, Ilona. And hopefully webinars like this do help to kind of give people here today a bit of that impetus, but the education point seems really important as well. We've had a question come in from Gary, who says, great to hear about the Board of Trade demonstrators, but what other initiatives is government currently exploring? We were under the illusion that a single trade window was being developed. What's going on with this? Ilona, I know that's a topic close to your heart. Do you want to talk about all of that?
Of course. So currently the government is doing a spending review, and we are also awaiting the trade strategy from the new government. So we have to just watch this space and see what will be the new approach when it comes to trade. I believe that there are many things happening, and there will be many new approaches and solutions presented quite soon. When it comes to single trade window, it's on hold, on pause for the time being, and I have just responded to a consultation on behalf of the Chartered Institute, including opinions of all our members that have responded to the survey that we've been publishing regarding single trade window. And it's very clear that people are waiting for a single trade window-like solution that could help them centralize and digitalize processes. So it's still an important project for many, and for many in the industry on different level, and then within the supply chain. So we are sending this message out, but also waiting to what's to come.
Sean, just out of interest, and obviously you're kind of from industry yourself, but is there anything you'd like to see from regulators or governments in the UK or elsewhere, indeed, to support the better adoption of trade digitalisation?
Well, off the bat, it would be nice to see, especially in the Commonwealth countries, a full adaptation of the ETDA Act, to be honest. It would help facilitate trade that way. I like the work towards the single source of truth, really, within the supply chain. The value of that is massive across the board. You know, we all want to do business with people, but we want to know who we're doing business with. You know, obviously from a business perspective, we're doing it based on a trusting system. But to have this all come together and this ecosystem of trade and what can be done with that and how things can be improved for a business is incredible. And it's just, we just got to get there and move there. And government, of course, helps us do that, when they do initiatives such as Leona's been talking about, because it helps greatly, and we all benefit from it.
We've had a couple of questions which are quite similar to each other, but it's sort of on this theme. So one has come in from Roger, which is, he says, we're in favor of digitalizing our supply chains, but are struggling to bring our supply chain partners on board. How do we go about changing this? So kind of how can organizations or supply chain operatives take the lead within their own supply chains to get their partners engaging with these solutions? I don't know, Sean or Lona, if one of you wants to take that first, Sean?
Sure, I'll give it a stab. So we actually understand this because when we're onboarding our pilot customers, if you will, we are seeing the B2B2B issue, and the first person obviously understands it innately why they're going to benefit. The second person doesn't quite get the value initially. They don't understand initially where they're going to see it. So we are working on, and we've been implementing a process, which funny enough, within the 1882 Bill of Exchange Act exists, that allows us to enable the third party or later down the supply chain into the system, still be a reliable system in terms of what UK law is. And then they're able to start to play with it, see it, and then they start to realize, oh, in my business, this would actually be valuable, right? So getting those supports and enabling just allows for grassroots acceptance and adaptation. And again, being here in the UK, where the UK is the place for international trade, that process and that adaptation works really well. The big issue that they have to look at is the time to set them up and get them involved. We'll say KYC, KYB processes. These are valid processes, but they're cumbersome right now and they need to be made frictionless. And if we can make them frictionless, we will help facilitate faster adaptation.
Great answer. Ilona, anything to add?
I think awareness is really important to actually talking to your stakeholders and letting them know that these are the efforts that you're planning to implement and that you will need them one day to be on board and digitalized to the same level, and can support what you are doing. I don't want to say you'll have to look for different partners if they're roadblocking you, but this is something that you could explore in the future as well to make sure that the partners that you're working with are going with what future brings and that they will be open to working on digitalizing the whole supply chain. But if your partner that's right now saying, well, we're not looking into bringing this on board, you also should wait because they will have more people like you and businesses like you coming and saying we are digitalizing and bringing digital solutions on board, and they will have to reconsider. So it might take them time, but this is what is coming. Like I said, it's not a buzzword. It's the future. So everybody will have to get on board.
I have time for a couple of questions, but the thing which comes to mind there is that it's coming for sure. But at the moment, if you're already doing it, there's a bit of a commercial opportunity to be gained by saying that you are a very pro-digital and very on top of this sort of piece in your supply chain, so you can probably steal a march on some of your competitors potentially. A question on the same kind of theme, but slightly different. So Danielle has asked, supply chain visibility is great in theory, but comes with commercial risks. Some information needs to remain confidential. How do we go about managing this? Ilona, do you want to start on this one?
Yes. So to just bring you an example of the BTDs that we have created, so the framework that we have created for our digital trade corridors, the solutions allow you to choose who sees what data, and different users have access to different levels of data. And it's really protecting the information that only people that are allowed to see are seeing. So you choose what you want to also show and send to the governmental agencies at the border. And of course, they can say, oh, we want this information to allow you this further simplification. And you can say yes or no, depending on the benefits for your business. But the way to approach it is just working with the software providers that gives you this trust and comfort that your data is safe and secure to a degree that you're happy with. So what you have to do is you have to review that they have implemented all the measures from cybersecurity perspective and that they can prove that it works.
Sean, is that kind of a...
I fully agree with that. I mean, our implementation of it, again, going back to the Act, there's something called notify party. And again, 1882, these guys are running around on horseback, so on and so forth. No internet, no telephone, and yet they design a system that basically does exactly what Ilona just said. It enables that process, only now we're able to do it electronically, we're able to do it faster, more granular, right? You don't have to have somebody running around with a document kind of wrapped in their sleeve. It's all electronic, it's all on the computer, and it's all real time, faster, more efficient.
And I've got some great images of sort of horse riders with kind of little kind of sealed pockets on their jackets or something like that. But final question, and actually it's one I particularly want to ask. And we've touched on earlier the social impact of this potentially. Sean, you mentioned impact finances as a term. The thing I'd be interested as well in exploring is, could digitalisation also enable more sustainable trade practices and greener forms of finance? Sean, do you want to come in on the sustainable potential?
Absolutely. I'm not going to say to you that all solutions that are electronic will not be huge users of electricity, which comes with a cost. But at the end of the day, if things are done faster and more efficiently, there is less consumption in that individual item, and then you extrapolate that across the board. Obviously, with what we are doing in terms of the CIC, our actual target, to kind of give you the scale, is we want to actually send 72 million women to school based on savings and as within the supply chain that can be done today. And if you take that number, which sounds totally outrageous at a level, but you look at the size of the supply chain, you look at the slack in the supply chain, it's entirely possible, entirely doable. And that huge impact across the board would deal with sustainability, eco improvement, so on and so forth. There's no way around it. It's entirely obvious and apparent. It just has to be done.
Ilona, you've got about 30 seconds to add anything to that. What do you want to say?
Everybody is today talking about the water and electricity usage when it comes to digital, and it's totally true. But I think we still need a lot of research that can be quantified. For example, movement of frozen meat from Europe to the UK. It's not just if it gets stuck at the border because of missing paperwork, for example. It's not just the issue of the losses to the importer. It's also the fact that this has to be delivered yet again. So there is the use of, again, the meat, the processing, the transport, the time. So all of that impacts sustainability as well. So we need a little bit more research on that, but impact is for sure big, and digitalization is bringing benefits to sustainability from so many different aspects.
It would make sense that if a truck is held up at a port, it's going to be emitting a bit more than if it isn't. So yeah, that seems really significant. But on that note, we're getting towards the end of today's webinar. So I'd like to thank everyone again for joining today's session, and a special thanks to our speakers in Sean and Ilona for giving such a great overview of the innovations that could digitalize and enhance global trade at a time when efficiency gains are particularly needed. Thank you as well to Boex for supporting us with this webinar. If you skip forward a couple of slides, just the last one. As we bring things to a close, please remember that the slides and the recording of today's webinar are being uploaded to the Insights section of our website, export.org.uk, under the Resources tab. As you leave, please do let us know what you thought of today's session and any suggestions for our future events by completing the short exit survey. But for now, all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.